Hey, welcome to another episode of Subscription Radio. I'm your host, DJ Fish, aka Ben Fisher, aka not so Slim Shady. With me, we have a very special guest, Matt Mullinex, founder of Huron. Um, Very happy, excited to have you on the show, man. And I know you're just a stone's throw away in Brooklyn.
That's right.
Oh
Thanks for
man,
having me, Ben. I'm super
awesome.
excited to
So
chat.
so before we turn on the record button, Matt and I were sort of nerding out and talking about just a little bit around what's been top of mind for their brand. We started talking a little bit about different types of subscription experiences. One thing that came up, and sort of like the way I'd like to open it up with, is can you talk a little bit, Matt, around like what do you currently subscribe to? Like what are your subscriptions?
Yeah, good question. Honestly,
Uh
not
huh.
many in CPG, which was crazy. I have the usual Spotify, Netflix of sorts, but we were kind of casually talking about this. I think one of the biggest pain points for me that I see with a lot of brands in particular is kind of solving for
Mm-hmm.
ARR or metrics internally in and around subscription versus focusing purely on customer trust, loyalty,
Mm-hmm.
and brand building. So creating really interesting value props, creating convenience opportunities. So whenever I see those kind of missing from the equation, that for me is a pretty big red flag. So I'm not a huge subscriber necessarily to a
And
lot of
so
stuff.
then I'm curious. That's interesting. Um, are there products that you don't subscribe to but you buy habitually in CPG?
I do.
Mm.
Coffee is one, oddly enough. Um, However, my wife is usually the driving force behind that. So it's kind of like she says jump, I say how high. So sometimes we're on one brand, then we're on the next a few weeks later, but we're ordering coffee pretty frequently. I'm trying to think what else, if anything. We do have a
Uh huh.
Thrive subscription, oddly enough. So we do order a lot of groceries off of Thrive. But I think coffee is probably like a steady state for us. Luckily for our bathroom, like
I
we're
was
pretty
about to
well
say.
stocked in Huron, so we don't need any personal care subscriptions on that front. But I know this is a category that people tend to subscribe to. But yeah, I think our base is kind of covered on the
Interesting.
commodities front there.
Yeah, I'm trying to think even in my own life. So we have like I have a dog who I don't trust in our house, or my wife and I don't trust in the house. So we have doggy diapers from Amazon, which is like it's gotten
Yep.
to the point where she's like an adorable dog running around in diapers. I try to ignore the reason why she has her diaper on. But yeah, I mean beyond that, there's like
Yeah.
coffee. Um, yeah, it's I try to think of like what are the because even the idea of subscribing to shampoo is interesting because my assumption is that you
hmm
need your shampoo, right? So if you run out of it, you're likely. I mean, my assumption is that's actually one of those weird moments where the customer is very vulnerable to potentially switching to whatever their habit was before using your brand, right? They go to like the local CVS because they don't want to smell
Totally.
like I guess just dry water. um, so I am curious,
Yeah.
how have you guys approached your subscription experience, and like, to what extent has that been an issue of someone running out? Because I think we oftentimes talk about like people getting too much product, but in your particular category, it would seem that like running out would actually be dangerous because that's the moment that someone would switch, and then they have a bunch of shampoo from another brand, right? And it kind of breaks up the cycle.
It's such a Yeah, you're spot on. I mean, it's such a fine line of the spectrum of I cancel because I have too much product, and you guys missed the
Mm-hmm.
reminder window, so now I've had to go
Yep.
out and buy my own. So what we've kind of decided internally is we know kind of by SKU what the typical
Mm-hmm.
replenishment rate is on a median base, on an average base, et cetera. And we've set our auto delivery replen rates
Mm-hmm.
default to 30 days, but are very upfront and proactive in the communication beforehand. So there's a 3-day notification, there's a day
Right.
before notification. So we're giving people an opportunity to postpone a week, postpone 2 weeks, skip
Mm-hmm.
this month, et cetera. But what we wanted to do was not miss that window because at the end of the day, it's very difficult to determine the discrepancies in
Yeah.
usage and throughput rates. we were chatting before this. You could be a trainer at your local gym and shower at your house 3 times a day, and maybe you're going through stuff every 2 or 3 weeks. Or you could be a consultant, be on the road for 5 days a week, and you're going through this stuff every 2 months. So we don't want to miss the window on the former, and we don't want to annoy the latter. So what we try to do is kind of, again, default to that 30 days, but be super proactive in our communication efforts to say, we just want to make sure that you have what you need. We're not here to annoy you. If you need to skip, like, go for it. You determine the iterations that we skip or postpone. But we want to, again, make sure that you're not hopping into the shower, showering or shampooing or washing with
Right.
soap bubbles, trying to make the most of it, or putting some water in the bottle and shaking it around a little bit and pretending like there's stuff in there that's not water. But yeah, it's definitely a
Have you
fine line.
experimented with any ways of almost trying to like get insight into we'll call it the persona, right? Where you could almost like have like a type form where, like, are you like literally the example you gave, which was how often do you shower? Do you go to the gym? I mean, maybe you ask more like general questions of like, are you very active, or are you, do you work out frequently, like what, or do you travel a lot? Have you guys done anything around that to try to get some qualitative insight into the person?
Oh, yeah, great question. All the time. I mean, at least we're sending a survey a quarter, and it's very segmented. So we have thousands and thousands of data points in and around not only usage rate, but also professions, activity level, etc. I still think at the end of the day, like, a dispensing of a body wash amount can still be subjective, literally on every shower. So that's why the jumbos have actually performed really, really well, because there's more of like a better understanding, at least on our end, around projected throughput rate. But when someone buys a jumbo, they could be buying it for themselves, or they could be buying it for their family of four, right? Again, like, it's very hard to determine some of these things. So I think the position that we've kind of taken and drawn the line in the sand around is we want to solve for not missing that opportunity to replan with the mindset of ultimately putting the customer first, so not annoying that customer. Like, we wouldn't, as customers, wouldn't want to receive 15 emails around, hey, you ready to reorder here, do this, do that, or conversely, making it impossible to cancel or postpone. So now all of a sudden you have 16 months worth of shampoo built up in your linen closet. Like, that's a horrible experience as well. But yeah, so like not missing that window, but being pretty proactive in communications to kind of manage that.
Which is interesting. The thing that ties into something another thing you and I were talking about, which was the relationship, or at least the way that you and the company think about lifetime value of a customer. Where I think I had mentioned to you that what's interesting is a lot of brands that I've spoken with are like, oh, we want lifelong customers, but when you really dig into it, what they want is they'd rather have someone get an extra shipment and then cancel in the first 90 days, rather than actually have someone be like, you know what, maybe I just want this thing delivered every quarter. If that doesn't fit we'll call it their payback period, yeah, they'd rather just like do the math. Like, for them, it's a math exercise, which on one hand, it's interesting. Like, it's like, I'll judge you by what you do, not what you say. Because a lot of people are like, oh yeah, we're consumer centric. We care about the customer. And then when you dig into it, you're like, oh no, we want them to buy one more time. Could you expand a little bit on at least what your philosophy around there was? I thought it was unique, and I appreciated it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, for sure. And one of the things we had discussed briefly before was kind of those two initiatives aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. I think a lot of our flows are in and around trying to get people in the fold on a quarterly basis, because that's how we think our throughput and usage rate, I mean, that should be kind of very much in line for someone to re-up. But yes, to your point, we want to make sure that the customer's ready for the next shipment, and we're totally fine skipping, postponing, what have you, to kind of foster that better long-term relationship. Historically, this has been a very, no pun intended, sticky category, where this guy might be a 10 to 15 to 20 year Old Spice or Dove for Men user who has entrusted us with his wallet and his personal care routine. So if we roll out the red carpet to that customer, we could in theory have a 5 or 10 year customer, which is super, super exciting for us. So it doesn't make sense, to push super hard to the point where at day 75, this customer's churning because we're the annoying body wash company, right? But one of the things that we enacted a few months ago, which has been really, really fun to kind of examine over time, is this
Mm-hmm.
notion of whale watching, we call it, which folks who have a higher propensity to spend more in a 90-day period and a 180-day period based on certain milestones or constituents met
Mm-hmm.
on first order. So AOV of X% more than regular AOV, or includes one of 3 to 5, let's call it,
Mm-hmm.
certain SKUs in the initial assortment tried. We know that those folks have a higher propensity to A, come back within 90 days, and B, spend more over those individual purchases. So we actually create unique flows, upselling other categories, talking about the benefits of what they purchased, is almost
Yep.
like testing grounds to figure out, hey, can we replicate what we've done here to kind of the broader customer set, knowing what opportunities could exist. I mean, we have customers who are 7, 8, 9 times customers of ours who don't know that
Mm-hmm.
we have face wash, for instance, right? So it's like, wow, that's like a huge opportunity that we're underselling. So we're constantly learning about what our customer does, sees on site, how they use our products, and we're refining the scope and the strategies and tactics to obviously get people back into the fold on a regular basis, but also when they're ready to
And I
do so.
wonder, I mean, obviously, so there's two pieces of that. One of which is you're observing existing customer behavior to look at and identify the whales. I am curious, and maybe have you run any experiments of almost trying to do the reverse, where driving the behavior that is reflected of the whales? Um,
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and the short answer is yes. So I think in kind of peeling back layers of the onion, we quickly realized that whales year to date had a certain tendency to be purchasing
mm-hmm.
similar products, with or without on discount. Just tons of like purchase
Mm-hmm.
makeup, if you will. Like, what are some of the things that are happening in a consistent buying pattern? And then in turn, how do we kind of recreate, not necessarily recreate, but amend or kind of slightly modify the site so that when a new customer,
Mm-hmm.
net new eyeballs come to the site, they're seeing a product assortment, featured products, etc., that we know tend to,
Appeal.
again, breed kind of
Right.
this type of behavior. So after, we're continually refining the scope and saying like, okay, like here's the next cohort of whales. Like, what are the similarities? Like, wow, it's that they're buying X and they're spending Y. So that impacts cart
Mm-hmm.
upsell opportunities, that impacts cross sell opportunities. And it's just kind of, again, like there is no finish line to this exercise. So we're constantly getting better and refining and tweaking, not only things that we're messaging post purchase, but also, the first 3 beats of the
Mm-hmm.
homepage, or how do we organize our PLPs or category pages, just so that, again, we're continually refining and trying to really grow that whale base, versus letting it
And
happen
when
organically on
you're
its own.
analyzing and looking for this behavior, I'm curious, like what tools are you using? I mean, is it as simple as that you're like segmenting by SKU, and I don't know what you use for analytics, and if you have a BI tool or what?
I'd like to say we have some like crazy built custom database, but it's good old
Really?
fashioned
Okay.
Excel. I think that's one of the benefits of having some
Uh
recovering
huh.
financiers on the staff is there's not an F1 key in sight. So there's a lot of Excel horsepower here. Um, Now we've definitely gotten to a point where like, wow, every time we try and open this model, it crashes everyone's computer. So now there's like multiple models that are
Yeah.
running these things, but we had looked at a few different analytics tools and platforms, and I think there's so many amazing options
Yeah.
on the market today that are doing so many amazing things for like off the shelf reporting and just getting very high level stuff accomplished
Yeah.
very quickly. I think where we're seeing there's a slight void is that second, third, fourth degree
Yeah.
of granularity that we want to dig into, whether it be whale
Uh huh.
watching, whale breeding, what
You have
have
you have
you,
an entire
getting to know
like
the customer at that super
vocabulary
intimate level.
around the orcas.
I know. We started talking about this a few months ago, and just like
Yeah.
the words just kept like, should we call this harpooning? Well, that's bad. We don't want to kill whales. I'm like, we're a vegan and cruelty free brand, so
Yeah.
that's kind of like antithetical to who we are. So then it became more like
Oh my
breeding and
gosh.
supporting. But yeah, a huge vernacular around that. But I think the point being is we have not yet found something that can off the
Yeah.
shelf produce kind of the level of granularity that we're gunning for. And I think that's really where the points of
Yeah.
differentiation lie. Like the devil really is in the details. And I think until we find that, we're pretty comfortable in managing a lot of this
Yeah.
stuff on
I
our
mean,
own.
that's really interesting because I do think that's one of the pieces too where people, because especially with insights like that, it reminds me a little bit of like Facebook's thing, right? Where like basically you want to get people to 5 friends, and then at that point they won't leave. It's almost like you're looking at
Mm-hmm.
the behavior of your customers, identifying the ones who are best, then trying to suss out what are the actual defining behaviors or characteristics, as opposed to just the noise. So were you looking for that specifically? Like, did you create a project where we're like, we're gonna find we'll call it like the heaviest consumers and try to reverse engineer, or was it something that just kind of someone randomly you just observed? And you're like, oh wow, this is weird.
No, it was
Okay.
definitely more on the intentional side. I mean, I think for us, yeah, no, I think for us, in another concept we have chatted before previously, um, we've had a pretty big emphasis
Hmm.
around retention, really from time zero. We've kind of crafted this mantra internally around finish line first, which again, if we're fortunate enough to get a customer to join the Huron journey after switching from one of these mass market products from a
Hmm.
decade's worth of use, like how do we make sure that they stick with us? So even in this like crazy economic cycle where interest rates are increasing and whatnot, and people are crying about Facebook and attribution and all this stuff, like there still exists
Hmm.
the other side of the equation, which is folks who are
Hmm.
already your customers. And I think that's where the lion's share of our attention has been
Mm.
since we launched. So yes, while we're still facing all of the noise and headwinds that the rest of the industry is facing on
Hmm.
the acquisition side, a lot of our efforts to date have still been deployed on the other side of the equation. And I think that's allowed us to tap into that base to get to know our customers better, and being like a more of a business decision from the onset versus like, oh, wow, like the macroeconomic climate's like throwing us a curveball. Like, let's focus on retention. That's really been part of our core
Got it. I'm
DNA
curious,
since launch.
I hate saying org chart because I feel like a jackass when I say it. But I'm curious, what's your org? What's your? Well, I almost
Yeah.
said orca chart. What's your org? What's your org chart? No, like yeah. What are the different positions you guys have internally? Oh
Yeah, so we're a
wow.
pretty lean team. We're only five. So it's myself and my co-founder Matt. So Matt handles almost everything product side, supply chain side, packaging, design and development. His background is he was 20 plus years at Estee Lauder running product development and corporate innovation. So he's kind of our product maestro, and I think uh, that really sets us
Hmm.
apart from a lot of our competitors. Is just like actual product quality. A funny aside, we've had one particular competitor order from us like probably around 10 times, to the point where like I've actually hand delivered the order on a few different occasions with like a follow-up note. Thanks so much for your continued support. So that's certainly like a tip of the cap to,
Yeah.
I think, product quality. And Matt's really written the playbook on that. We have a VP of marketing, Nate, who kind of leads the show on all things acquisition, retention, kind of has done an excellent job on that front. He joined us
Oh
in
wow. Yeah.
January, so he's our most recent hire. Um, Johnny runs retention and CX, and Johnny's kind of like what's a whale term I can use? He I guess is the ultimate like whale breeder of sorts. So he's the one largely running the analytics on this front. He's a former
Yeah.
banker, as am I. So again, like too much Excel man hours in here not to do deep dives. But he does an excellent job in really kind of teasing out like these early signs to figure out, hey, here are some of the similarities that we're seeing and how we can act upon that. And then we have a woman, Annie, who runs all of our social and brand kind of influencer partnerships and whatnot. So again, a pretty lean team, but that's the way we kind of like it, lean and mean. And I think we've been able to do a lot with a
So interesting.
pretty
So
pretty small
like
bench.
I guess so the two or there's a few couple questions. One of which would be I guess you were saying CX. So is he the only one that like how do you guys distribute even dealing with customer support?
Yeah, up until about 3 or 4 months
Shut.
ago, he was
Oh wow.
a one-man army on that
Yeah.
front, which is incredibly impressive. He's really kind of taken that responsibility and run with it over the past 2 years, which has been awesome to see, especially for a brand that puts a ton of
Yeah.
emphasis on CX and having the customer actually be the true North Star of the brand and the business. Since we started working with two freelance partners who are amazing, great understanding of tone of voice, great understanding of, again, another kind of internal saying, but like the notion of packing the
Mm-hmm.
customer's bags for them. So if we get an inbound around something potentially being not up to par or friction in the experience, how can we turn that experience from,
Mm-hmm.
a 6 to a 12? So that's just been something that's been really well orchestrated by Johnny and team. But yeah, I mean that's a huge area for us, and we've since kind of bolstered that
I
arm
mean,
of the
it was
organization.
fascinating to me. I mean, besides the fact how lean you are, so my assumption too is you've probably relied on like for branding and stuff. Did you use agencies for that? And you don't have any in-house engineers.
We
Yeah.
did at the start. Yep. So we did use an agency at the start. We've gone through kind of some iterations as brands do of kind of like less on visual aesthetic. I would say more on kind of like
Mm-hmm.
tone of voice and speak. I think for us, pushing pause on the word authenticity because it's like the worst
Yeah.
buzzword in D2C.
Yeah.
We like to say relatable. I mean, we've been there. Like I was the kid that grew up with bad skin. Like this has not historically been a fun category to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Usually it's pretty awkward. There is a lot of problem solution in this category. My hair is thinning. I have really bad BO. I have acne or blemishes. Like these aren't really dinner table conversations. So for us, kind of crafting this voice to create a very like open dialogue with the brand and like almost kind of like wearing the
Mm-hmm.
awkwardness as a brand and kind of on our own shoulders creates a little bit more of a comfort level with customers to ask these questions. And that's what we really like. And that's where we kind of thrive. So that's definitely been an important point of kind of like the brand
Mm-hmm.
maturation process, if you will. It's kind of just the evolution of speak. But, overall kind of visual aesthetics and other elements of the brand have remained
Interesting.
pretty consistent.
And I'm curious, going back to because you guys have been around for like 4.5 years, right? Like, were there certain plateaus, and like, how has your business changed, or the way you've even thought about your business? How has that evolved since? Yeah, like, were there certain like periods in your history that you look back on, and like certain lessons you've learned?
Totally. So almost 3 years old. So we launched July 29th, 2019. Push go at
Oh wow,
10:42 a.m. Eastern time. So to the minute. Uh, so coming up on 3 years here,
yeah,
but tons of learnings. I mean, it was just Matt and myself for the first 8 months. And then we hired Johnny on March 4th of 2020. It was like, we were supposed
oh
to go
my
to the office
goodness.
that Monday, and it was like, hey, there's this COVID thing. Like, we'll see you in
Uh
a
huh.
week when this thing blows by. And then obviously 2+ years later. So that's certainly something that has been challenging. I think that's not just for us necessarily, but it's hard to kind of manage a small team and operate in tandem and work alongside of a few number of folks when there's just an inability to read body language, like an inability to just like have banter in office around like, hey, what do you think of X? Like people don't want to hop on Zooms or
Yeah.
Hangouts all the time to discuss these things. Now there have been some efficiencies that we've certainly gained, but as we've gotten back into the office over the past couple of months, it's just been fun to like have these IRL conversations and strategic thought sessions and whatnot that I was craving kind of during the thick of COVID that we were just fundamentally missing out on. So that for us has certainly been a challenge. I think one opportunity that's presented itself that's again probably not just a tailwind of ours, but COVID was probably a net
Yeah.
positive in terms of like business momentum for a lot of personal care and grooming categories. I'm not saying like
Mm-hmm.
COVID was a good thing. It was a horrible thing. But I think as people were in their apartments, in their homes, they began to self-reflect around what am I eating every day? Like, what am I drinking every day? What am I actually using in the bathroom? Is like this the best product? And I think it was a natural time for people to kind of push reset, experiment, etc. And I think a lot of the brands that were well suited to position themselves, make themselves accessible via a few different distribution channels. It was a really, it was a really positive time from a
Got it.
business
And
standpoint.
I guess going back, digging into like the sort of like, has it been just steady growth? Were there certain plateaus you guys had to overcome? And then like, how have you? Yeah, what has the ride been like from a like user acquisition retention perspective?
Yeah, it's we've been fortunate to be pretty much a steady grower really since launch. There haven't been massive jumps and then subsequent
Mm-hmm.
like fall offs or cliffs. We've basically been month over month positive almost every month since launch. I mean, obviously there's natural points in the calendar, Black
Mm.
Friday, Cyber Monday. January is really big for this category, right? There's like an irrational, like, nope, this is my year, like starting fresh, here we
That's
go.
funny. That's their New
So
Year's
that there's a
resolution
lot
is
of
more
new year, new
showers.
me. Totally. Or like this is the year like I'm leveling up my routine and
Yeah.
whatnot. So those are certainly 2 points of the year where there's kind of some natural lift. But yeah, I mean, I think for us, very fortunate to have kind of steady growth throughout. I think one of the things for us that we learned pretty early on is Amazon for us was
Oh,
a really
interesting.
interesting
Yeah.
channel. Um, you know, I think given our broader customer base, which is kind of, the male consumer, 25 to 35, living in cities, not just New York and SF and LA, but Detroit, Atlanta, Dallas, Charlotte, Boston, Columbus, Pittsburgh, etc. Amazon is kind of like a
Yeah.
really good option, right? If you're in need of hand soap and paper towels and
Right.
toilet paper, like if you're right there with
Makes a lot
body
of
wash at kind
sense.
of digital point of sale, like it makes a lot of sense for the category. So I think the prevailing perspective on Amazon has certainly changed a lot over the years, where it went from being brand dilutive because you don't own
Yeah.
all the customer data to we want product in as many people's hands as possible. So you kind of choose your own channel, and we want to be there to make sure that we can offer
I
our
mean,
assortment.
have there been any negatives from your perspective of including Amazon? And was that something where how I'll say how early or how late into your business did you incorporate Amazon?
So we launched in February of 2020,
Oh,
actually. So really
right.
right before COVID, which again was like timing wise, like ended up working out quite well because Amazon became the most reliant retailer, right? Especially in the early
Mm-hmm.
parts of 2020. So that was very interesting timing for us. I mean, there are certainly some downsides. I mean, Amazon
Mm-hmm.
is a behemoth, and at times working with them can be difficult. Uh, there is certainly elements where we certainly wish we had customer emails of who's buying the stuff. But again, even if we were to turn on a massive wholesale account, we wouldn't know
Right.
that customer's email either, right? So, I think people view Amazon in kind of an unfair lens through which they don't
Mm-hmm.
view traditional wholesale, right? It's like, oh, you don't have any of the customer information. Well, you don't have any of the customer information
Right.
from a large wholesale account either. So, what's really the difference? So, certainly points of friction, of course, but for us, it's been a really efficient and a really strong scaling channel.
Interesting. Cool. Well, I was gonna say one thing I like to ask is, do you have a big ask? Like, is there something you can put out into the internet that if it were solved for you, I mean, it could be personal, it could be for business, but yeah, if what's something that would like change the course of your life or your business? You just kind of put out there.
Wow, this is definitely a first time question. Ooh, big ask. In the spirit of keeping things business focused, so interesting. I mean, obviously, being able to collect more data points in and around net new eyeballs, right? I mean, like any brand, our conversion rate
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately isn't 100%. So that means there are people who end up on our site
Mm-hmm.
who don't make a purchase, and we have no idea who they are, right? So it's a constant battle to collect information without being intrusive and kind of further understand how people are getting to the site. So I don't really know what the ask is necessarily, but if someone wants to create a tool that will help us identify who these net new visitors are, who maybe aren't purchasing or signing up for email flows or whatnot, um, that would be amazing. That's obviously like a total Hail Mary, but I think that's something where, um, for me, even looking at email, like one of the funny things we banter around internally, like baseball and email are the only time or the only things in the world where you celebrate like a
Right. Yeah.
33%
Yeah.
success rate, right? So for a conversion rate, like obviously it's a fraction of that. So just figuring out how do we get more people not only exposed to the brand, but then understanding how we can talk to them and communicate with them about the brand in a way that would ultimately resonate at a personal level. We don't want people just buying face wash. We want people buying from here on because they feel like they're a part of the journey, because they feel like they understand the brand, because they feel like the brand resonates with them at some level. I think a lot of our efforts are in and around the humanization of brand. This is not just a millennial pink brand that's kind of like has thrown a bunch of stuff in a tube that hopes to make money off you first purchase. We want you to be a
Mm-hmm.
lifelong customer of ours. So understanding like how can we tell you about the brand, about the products, et cetera, again, that will resonate at a slightly more personal level is something that we're really excited about.
Uh,
That was a
no,
multi-part
no,
ask, I
no, but
think,
it's
but
good. I think that you
hopefully
gave a bunch of sort of feelers out there, and I think I mentioned to you before the call, like BlackCrow.ai is a tool that I've gotten to know one of the founders fairly well, and I know a bunch of D2C brands that work with them, and I don't know if it would solve your exact question, but I'd be curious. Maybe we can revisit this conversation, and hopefully either someone who's listening or maybe potentially even the intro to Black Crow, we can solve that for you because that'd be dope.
yeah, I mean, I think, and it sounds like the work that they're doing in and around kind of like personalization of experience or a slightly more tailored experience is something that we're all kind of, you know, yearning for to some extent. So it sounds like
Yeah,
what they're doing is pretty
their
interesting and
pitch
exciting.
is they predict Black Crow AI predicts every visitor's future value in real time as they shop, right? So that's a separate question from you're actually wanting to understand who are these people, why are they not purchasing, so that you can get better insight into understanding of who's actually ending up on your site. Did I suss that out correctly? Like that's the sort of the intent behind it. Okay.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, but I think with the 1 degree of separation is probably what Black
Yeah.
Crow's currently offering, right? Which is like assortment merchandising of stuff to make sure that, like, hopefully we can tailor a better experience and show something that might resonate with the customer on a product level that it will help create that
Yeah.
longer term relationship.
Awesome. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you'd love to throw out there?
Um, you know, we talked a little bit about the importance of
Mm-hmm.
testing site and curating and understanding products that are selling through well, that are resonating with some of these whale
Mm-hmm.
customers on our end, for instance. I think there's been a lot of emphasis over the past few weeks in and around like, oh, the
Mm-hmm.
acquisition world is melting. Like, what are we going to do? Immediately, we're in cash
Mm-hmm.
conservation mode. There's a lot of other areas of focus that can command your attention that are going to continue to move the ball forward and the business forward if given the right
Mm-hmm.
amount of thought. So it could be from the retention side of things. It could be in and around site testing at an extremely granular level. And we're not talking about is the add to cart
Right.
button red versus blue, but it's like, are we swapping out homepage hero for these 3 products and like pushing the purchase opportunity higher in the funnel? How does that compare or
Mm-hmm.
test against status quo? Right. So there's a lot of micro testing that I think a lot of brands can and should be doing that I don't know if they are. And I think, again, that's a way to continue to move the needle in a challenging acquisition environment. So how are you continuing to create a really positive customer experience and making the most of those experiences, because maybe they're fewer and further between than maybe what they were otherwise in a super healthy acquisition
Got it.
environment.
Interesting. Cool, man. Hey, if people want to find you online, where should they go?
Probably Twitter is the easiest. Just at Matt Mullinex. I would say I'm more of like a Twitter observer than like a participant. I've like been trying to be better about participating, but I mean, there's such a wealth of knowledge that people share. There's at times you have to understand the iceberg theory is very much at play. People tout about how
Yeah.
swimmingly things are going at times, but you only get half the story, if that. So I think understanding that ecosystem operates in that manner is important. But there's a lot of great people that I've met on that platform, and a lot of folks that I think they're doing pretty amazing things. and it's been great to learn from them. And always happy to, strike up a dialogue and chat with folks offline as well.
Awesome. And we'll put your Twitter handle into the show notes, and obviously link back to your site and stuff. So
Awesome.
Matt, thanks a lot for being on the show, man. Appreciate it.
Sounds good. Awesome. Thanks, Ben.